Now, before we get started, I want to stress that I'm not a lawyer, and some of the things that I say here may not be applicable, especially if you live outside the United States. Copyright infringement, trademark, source code, all that stuff, it's messy, it's complicated. But with that all said, let's get into it. Now, you may be aware of the Grand Theft Auto 3 reverse engineering open source project known as RE3. There was also a reverse engineering project done for Vice City. Now, Take-Two, the company behind Rockstar and the GTA franchise, has just filed a lawsuit against the developers behind this reverse engineering project, RE3 and RE Vice City, which is the reverse engineering project. Today's video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. With internet privacy being such a huge deal these days, it's more important now than ever to protect yourself. With Surfshark VPN, you can easily hide your IP address and encrypt all data that you send and receive. You can easily switch regions to other countries in the world. This means not only your true IP address and identity is masked, it also means you can get around any annoying geolocation locked video content. You know, the ones that say, this video isn't supported in your country? This can get annoying for me when I want to watch local Aussie news. With Surfshark VPN, I can switch my country to Australia and this problem simply goes away. When I'm researching my videos, because of the nature of my channel, sometimes I need to access older unsecured websites of modding and the underground, and I feel safer knowing that my true IP address is not exposed to these sites. Surfshark VPN also allows you to connect to unlimited devices simultaneously on a single account, and this includes Windows devices, Linux, Android, iOS, Amazon Fire TV, and much more. Surfshark VPN has an awesome offer on right now. If you sign up at surfshark.deal/MVG, you will save 83% off and receive 3 extra months for free. And if you think it sucks, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, which will give you plenty of time to try out Surfshark VPN risk-free. This story goes all the way back in February of this year because Take-Two sent 2 DMCA notices to the reverse engineering project RE3 and RE Vice City, which were hosted on GitHub. So the source code for these repositories were hosted on GitHub. Take-Two sent DMCA notices and took them down, but only temporarily because the developers of these repositories filed a counter notice and effectively restored the projects and their whole repositories. And this is where we are today with Take-Two Interactive filing a lawsuit against 10 individual developers on the GTA 3 reverse engineering project for copyright infringement and copyright violation. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about this lawsuit that I want to walk through. Now, the first one is the point 3 here. Defendants conduct knowingly, willful, and deliberate. Defendants are well aware that they do not possess the right to copy, adapt, or distribute derivative GTA source code or the audio-visual elements of the games. Now, the first thing I want to say is, as far as I know, those repositories do not contain any assets of the games. You can't just download the GitHub repository and play these games. You still need a copy of GTA 3 or Vice City and extract the assets and the sound and data files from those games. So you still need to own a version of those games in order to play the reverse engineered version. So this particular point here is incorrect. Point 26 again says defendants have been public about their intent to create and distribute their own pirated version of the games and have used social media and the press to promote the infringing project's visibility as well as recruit users and developers. Defendant Ash R posted links to the RE and RVC GitHub repositories to his personal account on the US-based social media platform, announcing to his hundreds of followers that GTA 3 and Vice City has been fully reverse engineered. Once again, there is nothing about piracy version here. There's no intent to create and distribute your own pirated version of the games because you're just offering the source code. You're offering fully reverse engineered source code. That's not the same thing as pirating this. And I think that this is a bit of a reach from the Take-Two lawyers, that they're saying that, you know, you are reverse engineering this game, but you also are pirating the games. I don't think that saying that you reverse engineered something and, you know, mentioning that on Twitter is the same thing as piracy. Now, this particular lawsuit is a huge blow to the homebrew community and one that I'm going to follow quite closely because I want to see how this goes. But unfortunately, I've got some concerns. Now, I want to talk to you guys about reverse engineering and why it may not be enough of a defense for the GTA 3 reverse engineering team to use to kind of lean on to get the result that they want. So let's assume that I'm working for a particular company on a game, and let's assume that this is some source code that I've written for that particular game, and that game has been copyrighted, has been licensed, has been released, it's sold millions and millions of copies, it's made a ton of money. But this source code now is property of the company, right, that I'm working for. And this is a really, really simple example, but this is a simple piece of C++ that takes two numbers and adds them and returns the results. So as you can see here, num1 is 10, num2 is 20. We call this add two numbers function, and it returns x and y, which is 30. If I run this, it's going to return 30. So now what we want to do is load in that executable into a decompiler like IDA Pro, so we can reverse engineer the binary. If we locate the main function, we know that every piece of C code, C++ code starts with main, and we press F5 to decompile, we can start to see that it's generating C code here. Now, if we jump into this main 0, all of a sudden you can see the add two numbers output that we had printed out on the screen here. So what's going on here? Well, we already knew that we were plugging in the values 10 and 20, and this sub function, most likely, if we double click on that and just kind of keep stepping into it, you can see it's returning A2 plus A1. So this is our add function. So I can now rename this and say add two numbers. And that's exactly the same function that we had in our original code. So as you can see, we're starting to reverse engineer the binary. So this is our add two numbers function, and this is where it gets output. Now, this is essentially the same thing as what we saw in the source code. And reverse engineering tools like IDA Pro and Ghidra are so good that they can decompile code extremely well. And if you know what you're doing, you can pretty much construct one-to-one the exact source code that was originally developed. Unfortunately, reverse engineering of code, at least in the United States, is still copyright by the owners. So that add two numbers function, if that's copyright code that I own and you reverse engineer it, then I still have a legal right to sue you for copyright infringement. And that's what Take-Two is doing here. Now, the right way to do this is to use a clean room approach. Now, we've heard the term clean room talked about on this channel before, and other people may have spoken the term clean room before, but what does it actually mean? Well, it all goes back to the Sega versus Accolade case going back into the 90s with the Sega Genesis. And I actually made a video on this, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But just to summarize, clean room essentially is when one team reverse engineers the code, which is what the GTA 3 reverse engineering team has done, and they write a document on their findings. And then a second team takes that document or that specification and rewrites the program without ever seeing the original code. Now, clean room is the reason why emulators like Dolphin exists and Nintendo can't shut down. It's also the reason why the Super Mario 64 decompilation project is running on so many devices, and that project hasn't been shut down. Its GitHub repository is still active to this day. There is no legal basis for it, but the GTA 3 reverse engineering team unfortunately did not do this. In fact, in their coding style document, they even state, don't just copy paste code from IDA Pro, make it look nice. And I mean, this is pretty much, this is telling Take-Two that, look, we just used a reverse engineering tool and essentially just pasted it into our source code and, renamed it and cleaned it up. So how do I think this court case will go? Well, if the developers are outside of the US, then they could very well win this case, but they'll need good lawyers to beat Take-Two. And even with the clean room argument that I just mentioned, in some countries, clean room doesn't matter. If reverse engineering is fair use, then they have a good leg to stand on legally. And the developers certainly did not promote piracy in any fashion, and this is mentioned in the lawsuit numerous times. It makes it seem like they're hardened criminals that ran some calculated piracy ring or something and cost Take-Two millions of dollars, but when in reality, These guys are hobbyist developers that love playing GTA and writing code, and Take-Two wouldn't have lost a single dime on any of this whatsoever. However, if the developers were caught distributing binaries that ran on the Switch, Vita, or any other target hardware that contained binary and assets of the game, then that may be a lot harder for them to win in court, especially if they're based in the US. And I think that is one area where Take-Two may be targeting. I don't know if they have receipts on that kind of stuff, but if they were caught with binaries and distributing those around, that may be a little more difficult. But either way, I'm concerned about this one because if Take-Two ultimately does win, this has the markings of a landmark case that may end up shutting down other reverse engineering projects that are ongoing, and many of them are out there. Now, the homebrew community ultimately doesn't profit off any of this stuff. They aren't eating Take-Two's lunch, so to speak. This is a simple case of the giant multi-billion-dollar company flexing its corporate muscle, seemingly to clap back at a few hobbyist developers that have the passion for reverse engineering that love Grand Theft Auto because they failed to get their GitHub repository taken down in February. And I feel like Take-Two is just doing this because they can. They have so much money at their disposal that they just want to take this whole thing offline. Now, I've also heard stories about how they're doing this to kind of clear the path for the GTA trilogy that's supposedly coming back in a remastered form. Well, that could be true, but I feel like for me, this is an ongoing battle between these developers that, again, tried to get their GitHub repository taken down and failed, and this is kind of ultimately their response to this. But I want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments below. What do you think about this? Do you think the developers have a legal standing to fight back and win this court case? Do you think Take-Two is just going to come in and just change the way we think about reverse engineering projects? I certainly hope that doesn't happen, but I am very, very nervous about this one because this is something, once again, that could really just end up in Take-Two's favor and set a precedent going forward. And hopefully it doesn't, because, I mean, again, there are a lot of reverse engineering projects out there on GitHub, open source ones, of course, that could ultimately be affected by this, and that would be such a shame to see. But I want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments below. This one will be a story I'm going to continue to follow, and we'll keep you guys updated on any proceedings that happen in this lawsuit. But for now, guys, we're going to leave it here for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to put a like on it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.